this chapter I'm going to tell you about the lattice modifier. And if you want to use the lattice modifier, again, like in the hook modifier, it's easier to do it from the 3D viewport. If I create a new lattice, Shift A, lattice, and then I may want to form it so it fits in a cage around my object, the letter B for BioIllustration or Blender. And so this is a sort of a cage around my B. I just pressed S and then X to make the scale adjustments. And if I now go into the lattice options, I can see U, V, and W. And U, V, and W are just like the UV coordinates, X, Y, Z, but locally for the lattice. So if I increase the subdivision in U space, then you can see, since I didn't rotate my lattice, the x-axis of the lattice and the global x-axis are the same. So in x-axis I get more cuts, and I'm going to do the same for the the z-axis. So I'm going to leave the y-axis alone just for simplicity's sake, and I'm going to press Tab to get into edit mode. And if you're using the lattice modifier, it's often a good idea to create a vertex group and sorry, not a vertex group, a shape key. Create two shape keys. One is the basis, one is the unmodified lattice, because to my knowledge there is no reset button. So if you create the basis, then you're on the safe side. If you don't like what you did, just delete the key that you were working in and you'll be fine. So now I'll select the B and then shift select the lattice and press Ctrl P and select Lattice Deform. So it's just like armature or the curve modifier. Press Ctrl P and then just select Lattice Deform, and it will automatically put in the right object and a lattice modifier. Now if you want to distort letters and such, you can't go into edit mode and use shape keys or something, or just change the topology of it or the geometry. But then the lattice is a simple solution. If I, for example, now grab these two vertices and I move them, then you can see that the B is moving with them. So I can easily distort any object, no matter if it's a curve or if it's a mesh. The lattice modifier doesn't care. And as you can see, the distortion works just like whatever is closest to my vertex. Then this will get distorted. So for example, this part is further away from the selected vertex than this, so this part will get a lot more distorted than the upper part. And you can change the interpolation on the lattice options. Again, this is B-spline, you can set it to be linear. Then the fall-off will be a lot sharper. And you can select cardinal. I'm not sure what this does, to be honest with you. You might be wondering why in edit mode my lattice modifier looks a lot different than in object mode, and that is because by default this key is turned off. So if I drag the value over here, then my key gets turned on. And you guessed right, you can animate the lattice modifier. So you can go from the basis where your mesh is not distorted and then animate over time by hovering over here and selecting a keyframe and pressing I. Then you can animate this lattice over time, which is really handy a lot of the times. So let's get to the second feature of the lattice modifier. Shift C and add a lattice. And to be fair, I learned this technique from Jonathan Williams from his site at BlenderCookie.com, and he used a lattice to sort of deform an object while it's moving. And what he did there was take the lower vertices and just scale them out. And this will, let's just create the object I'll be distorting, icosphere, so you can see live what's happening. Of course we have to select the object, then this is a little small. What's happened here? My lattice is flat. That's weird. I must have pressed S and X and something. 0, But let's just create a new one real quick and make sure it's not flat. Subdivide it a couple of times, and yeah, this will do. And select the one more in U. Select the object, shift select the lattice, press Ctrl P, Lattice Deform. And if I now select these lower vertices down here, press S, you can see how the sphere gets distorted. And I'm going to move these down so they're much closer, and also to the lower ones, and also scale them out. I'm going to do the same thing for this here, and then I'm just going to move these closer down. And the funny thing is, the lattice will only distort an object if it's inside the cage that the lattice builds. If your object is outside the cage, nothing will happen. So if you animate the object to go through the lattice, as soon as it enters, it will get distorted. So in this case, it will sort of be squished against the wall. So this is a very elegant technique to you can, for example, simulate a warp field or something where your object gets distorted while it's flying through it. You can actually use, let's just try this real quick, add a new lattice, and then just select this lattice over here. That would be the new one. Is that correct? Yes, the new one's called lattice, so this is the right one. And if I now subdivide this a couple of times, and maybe press S and X and S, so this is going to be a tunnel. And if I then just create a material and create a new texture, clouds, and then add a Displace Modifier. No Displace Modifier, that's a pity. Okay, then let's just say Simple Deform Modifier. Let's see what happens. There we go. If I now move the sphere through this lattice object, let's do something more extreme like this. And I should probably also deform the you know what, this is too much. Just if you want a modifier to deform your lattice, just play around with that. All I'm going to do is scale up every other one, and you can see now that the sphere is traveling through here. It gets distorted while it's going through the lattice. So this is a pretty cool option as well, if you want to do something sci-fi or something. If I go to my second layer, you can see that there is a particle system on it. And if I press S and Shift A, add a new lattice, again subdivide it a couple of times, you can see that if I select this, Shift select this, Control Lattice Deform, in the modifier objects, of course with the particle emitters selected, if I now change the lattice, let's just press R and Z, you can see the particles are moving with it. So the lattice can even be used to distort particles. And if I do something like this, then I'll have a spiral of particles that I can actually control really easily. So this is not a force field that changes the physics. This is a force field that changes the absolute position of the particles. So you have an extreme amount of control as to where your particles are flowing. So you can see the lattice modifier has a lot of options. It has a lot of great opportunities. And that's it about the lattice modifier. And we'll talk about the mesh deform in the next section.